Hi everyone, I'm Duy Dinh, and I'm so honored to be a presenter for these EPIX talks. Today, I'll be giving a really brief but epic overview of the do's and don'ts of a scoping review. Throughout the presentation today, I'll be using examples from my scoping review on disengagement from care published in AIDS and Behavior. For context, people with HIV and hepatitis C have to follow two care pathways, including testing and treatment for each of the infections. So, at any point in time, individuals can fall out of care due to a multitude of reasons. So, we just wanted to map what was out there in literature about the topic. I completed this project in summer of 2023 as part of a Can Hep C fellowship, and despite being in Thailand for 2 months of it, I thought it was going to be an easy process. I thought I could finish my protocol by May 2023, review everything, and have it submitted by August 2023, but I was far from right. In reality, the timeline looked a little bit more like this, taking over a year to finish from start to finish, which is on the faster end of a lot of scoping reviews that I've been a part of. And so, long story short, Dr. Sahar Saeed and I thought that it would be a good idea to share some of my trials and tribulations throughout this very long-winded journey. So I'll be discussing getting started in protocol development, screening using covenants, extraction, analysis, and synthesis of the data, and then I'll close things off by opening up the floor to some questions and discussions. So where do you start? In recent years, there's been a huge shift in making systematic reviews in general more systematic. So there are several methodology papers and textbooks out there on reviews, but the gold standard one is the JBI, Joanna Briggs Institute Manual for Evidence Synthesis. The review process includes 5 stages. 1. Identifying the research questions. 2. Information sources and search strategy. 3. Study selection. 4. Data extraction and synthesis. And 5. Collating, summarizing, and reporting the results. And so the first step of a review is to identify the question. And given that there are many types of reviews, it is really important to understand the type of review such that you choose the correct methodology. So let's quickly go over the quick key differences. A scoping review has a broad question that attempts to explore and map existing literature, especially when not much is known about a topic. For example, my question was, what is the scope of literature on disengagement in care or from care among people with HIV and hepatitis C in high-income countries? As such, a scoping review could have several sub-questions, such as what is the definition of disengagement and what are the barriers and facilitators to X, Y, and Z? In contrast, a systematic review is much more narrow and specific, sometimes accompanied by a meta-analysis which runs statistical analyses on a pooled dataset. For example, a question could simply be, what are the factors influencing disengagement from care among people with HIV and hepatitis C? And this project was actually done by Ryan Way, one of Dr. Sahar Saeed's first undergrad students. So you can really see how one research topic could be framed by different methodologies and questions. And finally, umbrella reviews are a higher level review that are considered a review of reviews. The next step in the scope and review stages is creating a search strategy. For example, in my paper, we searched 8 databases and used a search string including terms related to HIV, hepatitis C, co-infection, and disengagement from care. In reality, my search string looked a little bit more like this because we wanted to capture all the possible papers out there. But we were only able to do this with the help of 2 major things. 1, I used existing literature. There are so many reviews out there that there is bound to be one related to each of the key terms. For example, I made my search string for disengagement using an existing paper on disengagement from care. I also got the help of a librarian who was able to help me refine my question and inclusion criteria, develop this search strategy, and ensure that I was following the JBI guide to a T. And I really, really do mean it. I love librarians. They made my life throughout this process so much easier. And so once you have developed your question, your inclusion criteria and search strategy is all about setting things into motion. Typically in scoping reviews, there are 2 stages of screening. Title and abstract screening, where you very quickly look to see if something is in or out, and then a deeper read of the article to see if it answers your research questions. So in my case, I started with 6,682 articles, removed duplicates to yield 4,462 papers. Yvonne, my second reviewer, and I then screened the title and abstracts of these, where we had to reach consensus on each and every one of the papers. We went down to full text screen 152 articles, repeated the same consensus process, and then ended up with a final sample of 27 articles to analyze. Doing this without a software would have been brutal. So researchers now usually use softwares like Covidence, and Queen's University actually has a subscription where it should be accessible to all students. And so once you have your papers, it is time to read through it all and extract the data. And this varies between questions. I focus on definitions, factors, and outcomes of disengagement in care, as well as any interventions that existed. But if I'm being honest, data extraction was where I struggled the most. I extracted way more data than I needed from some of the papers, and much of it never got used, wasting a lot of my time. For example, this was only a section of my extraction sheet, and I think I only used half of the data. So please learn from my mistake if you ever do a scoping review. Only extract what is absolutely necessary. It is key to really do a lot of thinking of the what would I need before actually starting extraction. Doing so will help analyze the data, which is all about telling the story. You are quite literally condensing tens, if not hundreds of papers into one. My strategy was to map the data to help spot the patterns. And these patterns are what make up your paper, where you often mix quantitative, for example, X number of studies found this, with qualitative insights, such as quotes, to beef up certain sections. Visuals also help tell that story too. For example, I used a Sankey diagram to show variations in definitions of disengagement in care. From that, it became very clear that definitions varied widely, like defining it based on accessing medications or attending a visit ranging from less than 3 months to within 12 months. And so pictures and figures really drive your story or main point home. Okay, in the wise words of Ariana Grande, yes, and so what? And truly, I think the beauty of scoping reviews, and any review for that matter, is the diversity of conclusions that you can come to. As we saw in the previous example, one of the biggest conclusions of my paper was that there was significant heterogeneity in the definitions of disengagement in care, making it incredibly difficult to make cross-study comparisons and actually enact change. Another finding that our paper made was determining a list of facilitators and barriers to engagement in care, which could inform future interventions. But I've also worked on several other papers as well. One scoping review informed the development of a discrete choice experiment. Another actually informed the UN in the development of indicators for LGBTIQ inclusion. As you can see here, scoping reviews are not that easy, but they can be so rewarding at the end. Um, Before I finish off, I would really like to thank the EPIX Lab team, especially Dr. Sahar Saeed and Yvonne Tan, as well as Sandra from the Bracken Health Sciences Library for all of their help throughout this really, really enjoyable process. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, as well as hear some helpful resources if you ever conduct your own scoping review. Thank you so much for listening.